The late autumn air carried a sharp chill as the sun sank below the hills, casting long shadows over the quaint town of Willowbend. The streets, usually alive with laughter and the chatter of neighbors, were eerily silent, a silence that seemed to foretell the darkness about to grip the community. At the center of the coming storm was Grace Holloway, the town's beloved nurse, whose disappearance would soon send shockwaves through the lives of everyone she had ever touched. Grace Holloway wasn't just a nurse. She was a confidant, a beacon of kindness, and the glue that held the town together. Her presence had a way of softening even the hardest edges of people's lives. Whether it was an elderly patient in need of a listening ear or a struggling young mother in need of reassurance, Grace had a gift for making everyone feel seen and valued. So, when Grace failed to show up for her night shift at Willowbend Clinic on October 15, 2019, alarm bells sounded almost immediately. Her co-workers knew Grace was never late, let alone absent without notice. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and as night turned into morning, the worry grew unbearable. By the next day, the town had mobilized. Volunteers scoured the streets and surrounding woods, but Grace was nowhere to be found. At her bungalow on Main Street, police found little to explain her sudden disappearance. Her car sat untouched in the driveway. The front door was ajar, but there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. Her phone, usually glued to her side, was missing. The initial theory was grim yet simple, a random abduction, perhaps by someone passing through on the nearby highway. But as the investigation unfolded, that theory began to unravel. What emerged instead were secrets about Grace's life that no one could have imagined, and they would lead investigators down a dark and twisted path. The initial days of the investigation were filled with frustration. Leads were scarce, and the sense of urgency was palpable. Then came the first breakthrough. Detectives discovered that Grace had made several large withdrawals from her bank account in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. This was unlike the careful, frugal woman they thought they knew. More puzzling was a set of encrypted emails found on her laptop. The messages were sent to and from someone with the alias Raven. Their contents, once decrypted, hinted at a troubled relationship, a mix of heartfelt confessions, veiled threats, and references to a shared secret that seemed to hang over them like a storm cloud. Then there was Elijah Cross. Elijah was Grace's ex-boyfriend, a man whose name stirred mixed feelings among those who remembered him. He had left Willowbend years ago under a cloud of suspicion, though no charges were ever filed. Rumors swirled that he had been involved in financial scams and had used his charm to manipulate vulnerable people. Yet somehow Grace had reconnected with him. When confronted, Elijah admitted he and Grace had been in touch but denied any involvement in her disappearance. He claimed she had reached out to him, desperate for help with a personal problem she couldn't share with anyone in town. His alibi seemed solid, but there was a lingering unease about him. Then Linda came forward. Linda was Grace's co-worker and closest friend, a woman who had been by her side through thick and thin. She told police she had seen Elijah lingering near Grace's house the night she disappeared. But her account was vague, and something about it didn't sit right. Why would Elijah, if guilty, linger in such an obvious way? As investigators dug deeper, cracks began to appear in Linda's story. Surveillance footage from the community center showed her and Grace in a heated argument just hours before Grace vanished. Witnesses described Linda as visibly upset, her voice raised, while Grace appeared calm but resolute. When confronted with the footage, Linda broke down. She confessed to confronting Grace that night, but her explanation was chilling. Linda had harbored feelings for Grace. Deep, unrequited feelings that had turned into resentment when Grace reconnected with Elijah. In a moment of rage, Linda admitted she had lashed out, striking Grace and causing her to fall. Panicked, Linda had hidden Grace's body in the woods. The search for Grace ended in tragedy when her body was found buried beneath a shallow layer of leaves near Linda's home. The revelation of Linda's betrayal shattered the town's collective heart. For a community built on trust and camaraderie, the loss was devastating. At Linda's trial, Grace's family and friends spoke of the void left by her absence, a void that would never be filled. Linda, once seen as Grace's closest ally, became a symbol of the hidden darkness that can fester even in the brightest places. Willowbend would never be the same. Grace's garden, once vibrant and blooming, stood as a haunting reminder of a life cut short. And though justice was served, the scars of her loss remained, a painful testament to the fragility of trust and the complexities of the human heart. For a community built on trust and camaraderie, the loss was devastating.